Then start.
Okay, now you can start. Start from the beginning.
Yeah, 1 second, sir. Start from the beginning.
Okay, your line. Okay, okay, madam. Proceed.
Yes, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. This is Sucharita. Good afternoon, children. In the previous class, we have been learnt about the factors of production and the 3 sectors. Yes. So today we are going to learn or discuss about the very important topic of the economy, Indian economy, that is called as a GDP. That is gross domestic product. So now we are going to learn what is the definition. What does it mean? For the country as a whole, we use the total value of the goods and services produced in the country as an indicator of income from the country. The technical term to denote this value is gross domestic product. What does it mean is all the values of the goods and services which have been produced in a particular country is a part of the gross domestic product. In other words, it is the final value of the goods and services produced within the geographic boundaries of a country during a specific period of time, normally a year. GDP growth rate is an important indicator of the economic performance of a country. Yes, children, try to understand the final value of all the goods and services which are produced in a geographical boundary of a country in a particular specific period of time. Yes, that is a financial year. Financial year, that is from the March to the April of any year is called as a financial year. So this GDP growth rate is one of the very important indicator of the economic performance. Now we are looking at a bar graph from the year of the 2010 to the 2020. If you observe, you can see there are some fluctuations in the bar graph that sometimes the GDP have been increased and sometimes the GDP have been decreased. So if I say that in the 2020, 1920, especially we have been seeing the pandemic year, that is we have been affected with the pandemic coronavirus. So with that, it have been affected all the countries' economic strength. And it also have been affected the Indian economy also. Okay, children. Now, how to calculate the GDP? We have been learned what is GDP mean? Gross domestic product. The gross domestic product calculates. How do we calculate? It is calculated by the total consumer spending, that is replaced with the letter called C, plus business investment I, and the government spending G, plus net exports, which is the total exports of that particular country, and the minus total imports. So here X is the exports, M is the imports. Okay. If we go for the next slide, here we can understand that the GDP is calculated by a formula or by an equation, we can say, that is C plus I plus G X minus M, that is exports minus imports, that it is equal to private consumption plus gross investment plus government investment plus and government spending. So we are deducting the imports from the exports. So this is the process how we calculate the GDP through an equation. So this equation is very important. Remember this equation, ma. Next, the GDP records. So up to now we have been learned about the GDP, which records all the market value of final goods and the services of the particular product in a country. But if we observe in the society, some goods or some items are not sold and purchased in the market. What are they? I'm giving you some examples here, like the cooking which have been done at home, cleaning, organizing, bringing up children, tending to plants and cattle. So these are the some of the services which have been done by the women in the household work are not coming in the value of the final goods and services in the GDP. So actually, though they are extremely important for the economy, but still we are not involving them in the monetary transaction, children. Next. Now we are going into an example how to calculate the GDP. Here they gave an example in the textbook. They gave an example in the textbook about a farmer. A farmer who sells his paddy to a rice mill owner 25 rupees per kg. Yes, children, try to understand 25 rupees per kg. So she sells her 100 kilograms of paddy at the rate of 25 rupees per kg. So the total value of the paddy produced by her is 2,500. Here, if we go, she did not buy any seeds, means there is no investment. The investment in the paddy for the agriculture is, production is zero. So the value of the paddy produced by her is 2,500. And the rice mill owner takes out the rice and sells. How he is selling? In the two ways. One, 80 grams of the rice to the hotler, each 40 rupees kg. And the second is 20 kilograms of husk, that is 20 rupees kg. So he is selling the two different products which we get from the paddy. The total value of goods produced by the rice miller is 80 kilograms of the rice into the 40 rupees plus 20 kilograms of the husk into 20 rupees. The total cost, the amount which he have been got by that is 3,600. So the hotler is paying the rice miller. Okay, what the hotler is going to do with that? He is going to prepare idli and dosha, and he is going to use the husk in the fuel. He's using the husk in the fuel. The hotel owner, by using rice and the husk, is making 5,000 of rupees as his amount. He's earning his amount from the sale of the idli and the dosha. So if you see this, we are going to calculate the GDP in two ways. Here, the total value of goods sold at each stage. Each stage means first stage at the farmer, second stage at the hotler, second stage at the rice miller, and the third stage at the hotler. Here, we are observing that the rupees 2,500 have been paid by the rice miller to the, the 2,500 is paid to the farmer by the rice miller. In the stage 2, the hotler is paying 3,600 rupees. So, if we see how it have been come, this amount, just now we have been calculated there that how he is selling it. He's selling the rice and as well as he's also selling the husk. So by that he got the amount 3,600. And now comes to the hotler. What he is selling is, by selling the dosha and idli, is 5,000. So if we go through that, here they have been given in the textbook that in the stage 1, the sale of the paddy by farmer to rice miller. The sale of the paddy by farmer to the rice miller is value added 2,500. Obtaining, how did we obtain that? By deducting the zero from the product value. Next, in the second stage, the sale of the rice and the husk by the rice miller to the hotler, that is value added this 3,600. How did we get this amount? By the calculation. So we have to deduct the 2,500 from the 3,600 to get the value added. Here we are calculating this GDP based on the value added. I repeat once again. Here we are calculating the GDP based on the value added. The first value is 2,500 with the farmer. And the second value was 3,600. So we are deducting that. So we get the amount of 1,100. When it comes to the third stage, the hotler who is selling his idli and the dosha in the market, he is obtaining 1,400. How could he obtain 1,400? Now we are deducting the amount of 3,600 rupees from the 5,000 which he have been earned. So when we add all these three stages, that is the 2,500 of the farmer and the rice miller, 1,100 and the 1,400 of the hotler, together becomes the 5,000. This 5,000 is called as the value added GDP, which we are including in the calculation of the GDP. It makes a sense. Here we can understand clearly that we are only including the value added at each stage, or take the value of the final goods and the services. Okay, means we are taking the value added at the each stage, or we are taking the value of the final goods and the services. The value of the final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year. Okay, so we are calculating the final goods and services which have been produced in the each sector. As we know, we have three important sectors in the Indian economy, that is the primary sector, secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. So whatever are produced in these three sectors in a particular financial year is called as the total production of the sector in that year. Okay, so here we have come to the calculation. They have been given us 4 financial years, the GDP in the rupees, and the percentage change in the GDP over the previous year, how to calculate the percentage. And the next is the growth rate of the GDP. So in the first 2010 and the 11, the GDP was 49 lakhs 37,000. Okay, so when it comes to the previous year, it was 45 lakhs 16,000. So we are subtracting or deducting the 45 lakh 16,000 from the 49,030. Sorry. We are deducting the 45 lakh 16,000 from 49 lakh 37,000. Then divided by the previous year's GDP, that is a 45 lakh 16,000 multiplied by the 100. Then we get the growth rate of the GDP. I repeat here once again. Here we are calculating the GDP by deducting the previous year from the present year by previous year into 100. Then we get the GDP rate. Okay. So next two, I think this is the activity, small activity which I'm giving you children, that looking at the first example, you try to calculate the next growth rate of GDP for the next 2011 and 12th year, 12th financial year, and the 2012 and the 13th financial year. So children, try to do this activity, which is very important to know that how the GDP rate or the growth rate of the GDP is changing every financial year. Next, here, if we observe our textbook, they gave the three different sectors of the three different financial years. One, they gave about the 1973 and 74, and the other is the 2013 and the 14. If you observe here, the three different colors they have been given. Agriculture is with the blue, and yellow is with the industry, that is the secondary sector, and the green is the service sector or the tertiary sector. And if you observe both the years, in the first 1973 and 74, the first agriculture sector is 2,45,479 crores of rupees. Okay. So, but when it goes to industry, it is 1,05,575 crores. When it comes to the service sector, 2,59,509. So here they have been asked a question here that which was the largest producing sector in 1973 and 74. If we observe here, the service sector is a little more compared to the agriculture, that is a primary sector. But before 1970s, after we get the independence from the Britishers after a long struggle, the major part of the agricultural sector or the primary sector, people were working more in that sector. But when we see gradually there is a change that the agricultural sector people or the primary sector people are coming to the different sectors. They are changing their work. Okay. When it comes to the second question here, which was the largest producing sector in the 2013 and 14? So probably here also the answer is with the 38,67,681. So if we observe approximately the sector have been changed, the tertiary sector have been changed with the 9.404 times. Okay, children. It have been changing gradually. There is a lot of change in the GDP every financial years or every 20 years if we calculate, or every decade if we go through. Now, we are seeing one more bar graph, which is showing the different three sectors again, with the blue with the tertiary sector, yellow with the secondary or the industrial sector, and the green with the primary sector. So by looking at this, we can understand that how day by day the agriculture is decreasing and the tertiary sector is increasing. Now, coming to the one more graph here, the real GDP growth, which we see here, there are a number of fluctuations, ups and downs, when we observe from the year of the 1971 to the 2017. See, sometimes the GDP is rising and sometimes it is coming down. So observe the fluctuations, where it is going up and where it is going down. So on what basis the GDP is calculated. So most of the goods which are produced from the agriculture are related sector, and most people were also employed in this sector. So as we have been learned in the past previous class, that three important sectors are there which play the very important role in our GDP growth. Okay, so how it is affecting? Here we are going to learn that in the olden days, as just now as I told you, that as I told you, in the olden days, when we got the independence from the Britishers, majority people, approximately the 70% of the people have been participated in the primary sector only. But afterwards, what have been happened is in the this you might have been learnt about the industrial revolution, which have been come or which have been took place in the country called England and in the continent of Europe, which have been taken place in the century of 1780, between 1780 to 1880, 17th century, between 17th and 18th century. So what did it bring? It bring a lot of change in the manufacturing. Mean the people who used to work in the primary sector or in the as a craft person or the traders, they have been shifted themselves to the secondary sector or the industrial sector. So because what do we observe here? We are observing that buying and selling activities have been increased many times for further increasing the demand for the goods and the services. So what is happening here? Day by day, the buying and the selling activities are increasing. So when it is increasing, probably the manufacturing or the production is going to increase. And the production goes on in the secondary sector. That is, when the industrial revolution was at the beginning stage, the new methods of the manufacturing were introduced, factories were came up and started expanding. Those people who had worked on farms now began to work in the factories in the large number. So just now we spoke about it. There was a mass production by factories at much lower rates, and these goods reached the market all over the world. So whatever we are producing from the different sectors, that is mainly from the secondary sector, is going to the different markets of the world. For these countries, industrial production gradually became the most important sector, both in the total production of the goods and the services, and also in the employment of the people. So, because of this industrial revolution, the production have been increased more in the secondary sector. That is, the production of the goods and the services also increased, and as well as the people shifted themselves from the primary sector and employed themselves into the secondary sector. So, employment also have been increased. The industrial sector became the dominant sector, and the importance of the agriculture sector, both the employment and the production, declined. So what is happening when these people shifted themselves from the primary sector to the industrial sector? There the people have been reduced. So declined the agriculture in the agriculture sector, that is the primary sector, the labor have been decreased. In the past 50 years, there has been a further shift from the industry to the service sector for the developed countries. So if we observe in the past 50 years, we have been observing that before it was primary sector, then afterwards it have been shifted to the secondary sector. Now in the past 50 years, the labor started coming to the shifting themselves from the industrial sector to the service sector. Where we are observing this specially, we are observing this especially in the developed countries. So this, now the service sector has been the most important sector in the terms of the total production. If we observe the bar graph in the last pages also, which we have been observed is that majority part of the people have been shifted themselves into the second service sector or the tertiary sector. Most of the working people are now employed in the service sector. GDP is made up of production of from three sectors, that is agriculture, industry, and the service. But here the service is again comprised into the three types. What it is. The service sector is again divided into three sectors, that is the community, social, and the personal services. Second is the finance, insurance, and the real estate. And the third is the trade, hotels, transport, and the communication. So what is the part which comprise, what does it comes under? When we see the community, social, and the personal services, we observe public administration, defense, education, health, veterinary activities, media, library, museums, archives, etc. When it comes to the finance, we can see that service of banks, post office savings account, non-bank financial companies, life insurance, and the general insurance corporation. When it comes to the trade, hotels, transport, and the communication, we observe departmental stores, regional transport services, airways, railways, seaways, BSNL, news channels, media, TV, email, restaurant, hotel, etc. So service is again divided into three. Now, if you observe this pie chart, it is showing the percentage of the three different sectors overall in an Indian economy. If we observe the colors here, first in the 1973 and the 74, agriculture was 43%. When we come to the 2015 and 16, it have been reduced to 19%. So there is a drastic change or a gradual drastic change which we observe, that the people or the labor have been shifted themselves from the agriculture to the secondary sector or to the tertiary sector. So the primary sector share have been decreased when we compare in the 73, 74 and 2015 and the 16. Going to the next, pink color indicates secondary sector, which was 22% in the 73 and 74 financial year, but it has been increased to 28%. A slight change which we can observe here that the secondary sector have been increased. As just now we have been learned that the tertiary sector have been again divided. So blue color indicates trade, hotel, transport, and the communication. It was only 15% before. Now it have been increased a little slight change with the 19%. Finance, insurance, and the real estate, it have been increased from the 18% to the 8% to 22%. And when it comes to the community, social, and the personal services, it is the same. Before also it was 12%, even now also it is 12%. Now, if we observe during the 43-year period, the output share, if agriculture sector has fallen drastically, there was a small increase in the share of the industrial output in the GDP. So looking at that pie chart, we can understand that there is a drastic change in the agriculture sector, and we can see the change in the industrial and the service or the tertiary sector. Now, we have three types of gross domestic product. Real gross domestic product, which is the GDP after inflation has been taken into the account. And second is the nominal gross domestic product. Nominal GDP is a GDP at current prices with inflation. So before one is after inflation, this is with inflation. And the gross national product and the net gross domestic product. Now, we are going to observe the remaining countries in the world, that which country has the largest GDP as per the per capita. If we go to that, according to this 2019 and 20 financial year, Luxembourg and Qatar would have the highest GDP per capita income in nominal and PPP. What does a PPP mean is purchasing power parity, respectively. And South Sudan and the Burundi would be the poorest economy in the nominal and the PPP respectively. Okay, so when it comes to our country, our place is in the 6th. The India is kept in the world's 6th largest economy by nominal GDP and the third largest by the purchasing power parity, that is a PPP. According to the IMF, India Monetary Fund, on a per capita income basis, India ranked for International Monetary Fund 42nd by GDP nominal and 124th by GDP, that is a PPP, in 2020. Now, if we look at this slide, the economy grows by 3.1% in the January to March quarter, that is in this pandemic year. As we have been observed, that's why these online classes are going on, because we are not going to the school. So in this pandemic situation, starting from the January to the March, it have been grown, we can see in the January to March. But when we go, it have been decreased after the lockdown. Day by day, it have been decreased because the total production have been stopped. But after the unlockdown, again it have been come back, but it takes a little time to coop up and come back to our past GDP, or to increase our GDP, it takes a little time. So if you observe here, you can see there are two different lines. Okay, so the source at the last, if we see that GDP fluctuations are going on, it have been increased in the starting, but afterwards it have been decreased. What does it mean? Because of this pandemic, it have been decreasing or declining. Here also, you can observe in the July 2017, the GDP was 6.5, and in Jan 2018, it have been increased to 7.6. And when it comes to the July 2018, again it have been decreased. In between, it have been increased with the 8.2. Then it came to the 7.1 in the July. Again, it have been decreased again to 6.2, 5.6. So if you observe in the January 2002, it have been decreased to the 3.1, and July 2020, it have been decreased totally to the minus 23.9. Means what is happening, that day by day, the GDP is decreasing. It has to coop up a little. Now, here you observe, based on the constant prices, every year, every financial year, if you observe that the GDP growth, how it is. It was good in the 16 and 17. It had been declined a little in the 17 and 18. Again, a little declined in the 16, the 6.8 in the 18 and the 19. And when it comes to the 19 and 20, it have been totally declined up to the 5. But again, it may grow between the 6 to 6.5, because again the works have been started, the production have been started, and everyone started doing their duty. Now coming to the next slide. So here we go with that the top 10 countries in the world as per their GDP according to the 2019 and the 2020. First is with the United States, China, Japan. Fourth place with the Germany. Fifth, United Kingdom. Sixth place with the India. 7, France, Italy, Brazil, Canada. So these are the 10 important countries. Now, coming to the graph. If you're observing, when it is in June, the quarter, India is 1. So every country have been affected with the pandemic, worst hit of the pandemic. Every country have been lost their GDP growth as they have been went through the lockdown. But the only China was raised up. Everyone are below the line, but they are above the line with a 3.2%. So if you observe, what does it mean? That still in that situation also, the China was not hit with the worst economy. It was good economy, but the remaining countries have been affected with the worst economy. When we observe the lowest, so the fluctuations or the ups and downs which have been taken place in the recent years, or from the 2012 to the 2020, if you observe. So what we are going to read here, that the GDP is slowing down or is negative, it can lead to the fears of the recession, which means layoffs and unemployment and declining business revenues and consumer spending. The GDP report is also a way to look at which sectors of the economy are growing and which are declining. What does it mean? That day by day the GDP is declining. So it may lead to the recession, unemployment, declining in the business and consumer spending. We are not able to spend more amount. All the prices have been increased. So economic growth is measured by the increase in a country's total output or real gross domestic product, GDP, or the GNP, that is a gross national product. Excuse me.
Today we are learning about
Learning. So up to now, we have been learned.
What we have learned about today.
So we have been learned about the definition of the GDP, how to calculate the GDP, and the role of the 3 sectors in the GDP, and the 3 different types of the service sector. So in the next class, we are going to learn about the employment in India and organized and unorganized sector of employment in India. Thank you. Time is there.